Hi, my name is Arthur and welcome to Celestial Wellbeing. Today I want to take a look at boundaries, and I'm going to use jealousy as an example as well, and we'll take a little dive into jealousy too. So let's just start with boundaries. And so what's a boundary? So in the common sense, a boundary is like setting up a fence around a property, or it's creating an area within your being that is acceptable or it's unacceptable. And so this is a really interesting word, and it's very similar, not the same, but it's very similar to the word trust when I did trust. So I think the common mistake when setting boundaries is people believe that they need to be doing something, or they need to make a decision on what's acceptable and unacceptable, and therefore the boundary is created. So I'm actually going to throw this a little out of whack of what the common sort of perception is, because I find the common perception to be really projective and really outward driven. And it also takes away, and I hate to say this, but it also takes away your own personal responsibility about what you're doing to create the boundary. So boundaries can occur, but they occur in a different way other than saying, you know, I no longer accept this, and if this person behaves in this way, then this is the decision I'm making. You know, it's a very outward, aggressive approach to boundaries. But before we go into why I think that and how I see it, how it works, let's look at the word itself. So you've got bound, boundaries or boundary. So what I find interesting about this word, if we draw a line right here, now we have two words. You have the word bound, and then, you know, a little play on words, bound arise. So when you set a boundary, are you able to arise? Or are you just bound when you set a boundary? Because by setting a boundary, you're kind of limiting yourself into things coming into your being as well and into your life. And sure, you might say to yourself, yeah, but the things I don't want. Sure, but what are boundaries usually set around? Other people, yeah? So you can have a really logical approach to a boundary. And let's say, for example, you live on a farm, and you know, you've got a heap of veggies growing in your little garden, and then the animals really take a liking to your vegetables, and so at night while you're sleeping they'll come and eat your veggies. So what do? You know, you set up a fence, you know, you create a boundary around your property to prevent these animals from, you know, eating all your hard work, yeah? But then what happens, and that's, you know, that's a real logical look at it. So you're actually preventing something entering your space from eating from you, ultimately. But the funny thing is about people is we kind of work, or humans, celestial beings, we work a little differently. So this is my human. Now the funny thing about humans is, and part of our ability is creation. And creation is quite a deep thing. Because no matter what we do in this physical world is a creation. And that's a really important thing. But also, our need for survival is what causes us to create boundaries, yeah? So if you feel the need to create a boundary towards a certain kind of person or certain situations, then your celestial being is feeling threatened. And so then you'll create a boundary. So let's just say in this case, a wall. You know, against a particular situation. Yeah, so it could be, maybe your last relationship, your partner at the time, was a really heavy drinker, was really abusive, really jealous, all these kinds of things, right? And so you've made a decision on your next partner. You don't want the same attributes that your last partner had. Yeah? And so you've said to yourself, these are my boundaries, right? If you can tick yes to all the things that I have set boundaries towards, then you can come through my wall and then I'll be a part of you. Yeah? But what's interesting about the fact that we are creators, what's actually happening here? So you've set your boundaries and you've created a wall in your space around what's acceptable and what is not acceptable. Now the funny thing about this wall is it becomes a creation in itself. Yeah? So it's now its own creation. Now the funny thing about this particular creation, it has its rules. And not only does it have its rules, it also has its own projections that have come from you. So now while this wall is looking for the appropriate candidates to enter your sphere, you've made some really logical decisions about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Yet, this wall, being its own creation, separate to you, it's become its own entity, right? It has a consciousness of itself and it also has its own attraction sphere. So while you're focusing so much on all these red X's and you're open to the green ticks, the wall doesn't care. So the wall is going to put out everything that you're opposing. I know this sounds crazy, because the wall is its own entity now. It's become its own thing, right? And so you're actually giving it energy by the things you don't want. Now the funny thing, let's say your last relationship was your partner was angry all the time. All the time, they were just an angry person. There was nothing you could do to change that, nothing at all. So you've taken your anger experience and made it a part of your wall, right? Now the universe, God, Spirit, however you want to see it, doesn't hear, I don't want an angry person, right? Doesn't care about this part, all it cares about is this part. So if you look deep enough into the law of attraction, what your wall is actually doing is actually introducing more of these kinds of people. Okay? Are you confused? So let's look at how you can create a boundary in a really healthy way. And we're going to use jealousy as an example. So the key thing is understanding who you are and why these situations are actually coming in. And then once you understand your role in these areas, then the boundary will create itself. So let's look at the word jealousy. And so I'm going to give a personal experience here. So I had a relationship and there was a high amount of jealousy within this relationship, and from myself and from my partner. And what was interesting, two people, in this kind of jealousy environment is really toxic. And if neither one is willing to budge, it becomes even more toxic, yeah? Like you can't move, you end up being stuck in a cage. And through my journey, I thought, it was killing me. this feeling of jealousy was just eating me away, and I couldn't resolve it. And so I remember spending a great deal of time just around this word, exploring it. And this is as I started my journey in words. And so I looked at the word, and I actually just physically just looked at the word, jealousy, jealousy. And I realized a lot about this word. And so what's funny is if we draw a line through there, we have je, and lousy, right? So if you've ever been in jealous mode, if you will, it makes you feel super lousy, yeah? But the funny thing about je, J-E, in some older languages, in some older texts, je actually means I am. And so if we break down what jealousy is, it is I am lousy. So if I went back to my initial understanding of what jealousy was, it was other person. It was very projected, yeah? So I blamed the other person for making me feel the way I was actually feeling, right? Now they were just behaving the best way they knew how, but it was affecting me so greatly, it was making me feel lousy. And so from this, I was like, okay, how's it making me feel lousy, right? It was affecting my self-esteem. It was affecting my self-worth, decisions, diet. Like if I can find it, like I had like a whole whiteboard just full of how this affected me and affected my entire being. Now, after exploring this about just me, had nothing to do with the other person, all I did was take this on board and faced it. And it wasn't an easy thing to do, I have to admit. It was actually really tricky. But after exploring it in such detail on all the aspects of how it affected me, like it would affect my work, it would affect the way I think, it would affect the way I treated my partner, it affected so many aspects of my being, I was actually really blown away how it actually affected my spirit, my being, my celestial being. Like it blew my mind. So, after I explored it and I realized how much it affected me, I no longer blamed my partner for who she was, because that's just who she was to the best of her ability. And after seeing it within myself as to how much it affected me so greatly in so many aspects of my being, well, no wonder I was reacting the way I was reacting. And in the time of the relationship, you know, it would be me, the partner. One person would trigger, yeah? Bang. And then if I was stuck in the old mindset of what I believed jealousy to be, I'd want to defend it. And it would come back at me. And I would want to defend it again. And then maybe I'd incite a little bit as well to be like, you know what, you know, here, you have some. And it would be defended. Yeah, so you could kind of see this really interesting energetic game going on. And there was a wall. Lo and behold. So we were both projecting our fears. But then, when I began to look at jealousy for what it meant to me, what happened? My part of the wall began to diminish. And what was interesting here is I realized I actually didn't need a wall. I didn't need to make decisions. So my poor partner at the time would be always projecting. You know, looking for a bite or, you know, whatever it was for her, I don't know. But what would happen is, once I realized how it affected me, that energy would just do this. It'd just go straight past me. And what was even more interesting is I didn't have to make any decisions because I knew how it made me feel and I understood why it made me feel the way it did. And so there's no wall. I didn't have to set a boundary. Yeah? So this person was still allowed to be exactly who they were, yet I could see their pain much stronger and much clearer. And from there, I could start sharing. And depending on my partner's walls, boundaries if you will, it was up to them whether they accepted it or not. Had nothing to do with me. You see, there's a clear distinction of energies going on now. I looked at my entity, I explored my entity, and I realized there's no need to build a wall. There's no need to build a boundary. You know, it was a simple understanding of how it made me feel and my role in that, you know, because it would be really unfair for me to say that I didn't also project, because I did, yeah? And the realization that I was a part in that, you know, mutual wall, realized I didn't need to create a wall. And so therefore the boundary created itself. I didn't have to project my boundary. I didn't have to tell the world what I was willing to accept or not willing to accept, because it doesn't matter what the world thinks. It matters what I think and it matters what I feel. And so therefore, the boundary creates itself. You don't need to project a boundary. You don't need to build a fence. You don't need to do any of those things, because the moment you do, you're only going to create more of what you don't want. And you're always going to be facing those situations that you don't want. I know it sounds crazy and it sounds kind of backwards, but you have to understand we are creators, yeah? And if you don't want, you are creating what it is you don't want. The more you understand about why you don't want, then it disappears. It just disappears. It just back to dust. It just floats away. It doesn't exist in your field anymore. Yeah? So if you look at your energetic field in a real simple way, you know, we can use all the colors of the rainbow. You know, we all want to be loved. And so, you know, we put that out there. But then something happens, yeah? You get that love, but somebody hurts you. And then somebody else hurts you. And somebody else hurts you. And, you know, you're getting hurt left, right, and center. You know, and it starts affecting your love. And so what most people do, again, is they'll set a boundary to all these black spots. I don't want. But you actually haven't resolved this black spot, yeah? Because the perfect person might be out there, you know, wanting to push through that black spot. But you're so stuck on not wanting, you're also preventing things from coming in, yeah? What's the purpose of building a wall? To stop things from passing. Actually, I was listening to Alan Watts the other day, and for those of you who aren't familiar with Alan Watts, he said something really interesting while I was exploring this. And he said the funny thing about walls, I can't remember his exact wording, but if you're on this side and the other person is on that side, and for whatever reason you guys come together, you both have something in common. Yeah? So you both share the same wall. And from here, it's pretty much who can throw the stones the hardest and the furthest. Yeah? So something to think about. And I hope that made sense. And have a great day. And check out the Facebook page for any upcoming events. Like and share, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. And thank you. So after reviewing the video I just did, I just wanted to just point out that once I understood how these things felt to me, it took some work, yeah? And it took a lot of work in the sense that I'd have to be mindful of how I was feeling. And then, you know, I had to keep catching it, because once you create that wall, it does create its own consciousness as well. And that consciousness that that wall creates can be really overpowering, and it can be really tricky to see it as a separate thing. So I just wanted to say, you know, it does take practice, and it does take some kind of work to really create a healthy boundary. Yeah, it's more than just a decision. It's a lot more than just a decision. It's an understanding. It's self-discovery. Yeah. So just wanted to put that out there. Have a great day.